Someone once said, if your voice is loud, some people will listen. But if your message is strong, everyone will pay attention. Hi everyone, welcome Tat channel, and today I have an inspiring story for you.
In a small village, nestled between vast fields and winding dirt roads, lived an old woman in a simple wooden house. Time had etched deep lines on her face, yet her eyes still sparkled like the morning sun. No one in the village could remember exactly how old she was, but everyone knew one thing: she always smiled. People adored her not just for her kindness, but also for the wisdom she carried. Whenever someone was troubled or burdened with sorrow, they would come to her, seeking comfort and guidance. Her words were never grand or overly poetic. Instead, they were simple, heartfelt, and full of warmth. She wasn't wealthy, nor did she have a large family by her side, yet no one had ever heard her complain or express sadness. Whether it was a rainy day or a sunny one, whether the harvest was plentiful or scarce, she remained the same serene, content, and smiling. Her unshakable happiness puzzled many in the village. They often wondered, how can she always be so cheerful? Has she never experienced pain? This question lingered in the mind of a young man from the village. One day, unable to hold back his curiosity, he finally approached her and asked, "Grandma, why are you always happy? No matter what happens, I've never seen you sad. What's your secret?" That evening, the sky was painted in soft golden hues, and a gentle breeze rustled the old trees in front of the elderly woman's house. The young man stood silently for a moment, observing her. Many elders in the village had aged, but none quite like her. There was a calmness about her, a quiet joy that seemed effortless and unshaken. Finally, unable to hold back any longer, he hesitantly asked, "Grandma, why are you always so happy? No matter what happens, I've never seen you sad. Haven't you ever felt heartbreak or despair?" The old woman paused her work and looked up at him with kind, knowing eyes. A warm smile spread across her face, as if she had heard this question many times before. She spoke gently, "My dear, life is full of ups and downs. Some days are good, and some days are bad. Everything changes. But one thing I've learned is that happiness doesn't come from what happens around us, it comes from how we choose to see it." The young man frowned slightly, still unsure if he understood. He asked again, "But how can you be happy when terrible things happen? When people lose something precious, when they are in pain, how can they still find joy?" The old woman let out a soft chuckle. In her eyes, there was a depth of memories, years of love, loss, and storms only she truly knew. She sighed gently, her gaze drifting into the distance, then said, "My dear, let me tell you a story." The old woman fell silent for a long moment. The evening breeze gently ruffled her silver hair, and the fading sunlight cast a soft glow in her eyes. Perhaps she had told this story many times before, yet each time it brought back memories that would never fade. She spoke slowly. "When I was young, I had a small but happy family. My husband was a kind and hard-working man. We weren't rich, but our simple meals were always filled with laughter. Then, one day, he fell ill." Her voice grew quieter, as if even the wind had hushed itself to listen. "We didn't have much money, and medicine was expensive. I did everything I could, begged for help, but nothing could save him. The day he left me, it rained heavily. I sat beside his bed, holding his hand as it grew colder, and I felt my heart shatter." The young man sat frozen, barely daring to breathe. He had never heard her speak of her past before, and he had never imagined that the woman who always smiled had endured such deep sorrow. The old woman continued, her voice still gentle but filled with emotion. "I cried for days. I thought I would never be happy again. But then, in the midst of all that pain, I realized something. If I kept drowning in my grief, what would happen to my children? Would my life be nothing but endless sorrow? I had already lost someone I loved, but I didn't want to lose myself too." She looked directly at the young man, her eyes filled with the strength of someone who had weathered countless storms. "So, I made a choice. I decided to see life differently, and in doing so, I found happiness again." The old woman paused, as if allowing the past to settle in her heart. The young man remained silent, feeling the weight of the pain she had endured. But the question that puzzled him the most still lingered. How did she find the strength to move forward after such great loss? Sensing his unspoken thoughts, the old woman smiled gently and said, "Every morning when I wake up, I tell myself, today is a new day, and I will find something to be happy about." The young man furrowed his brow, still unsure of the deeper meaning behind her words. She continued, her voice soft yet filled with wisdom. Some days, it's easy to feel happy at a beautiful sunny morning, a cool breeze, a flower blooming in the garden. But there are also days when it's hard. Days when old sorrows creep back. In days when nothing seems to go right. Yet even on those days, I make an effort to find one small thing to be grateful for. It could be a warm cup of tea, a friend stopping by, or simply the fact that I am still breathing. The young man sat in quiet contemplation. He had never thought that happiness could be something so simple. The old woman chuckled softly and said, "You see, happiness is a choice. We can choose to dwell on our pain, or we can choose to cherish the good no matter how small. It's not always easy, but it's the only way to hold on to joy." The young man sat in silence, the old woman's words lingering in his mind. He had always thought that happiness was something grand, having wealth, a smooth life, free from loss or hardship. But now, he realized that happiness didn't come from the outside world. It came from the way people chose to see life. The old woman looked at him, her kind eyes filled with understanding. She spoke slowly. "My dear, no one can go through life without sorrow. But what truly matters is not how many hardships we face, but how we choose to respond to them. If you let sadness consume you, life will feel like an endless storm. But if you learn to find joy in the little things, you'll realize that happiness was never far from you." The young man took a deep breath. Her words felt like a light breaking through the shadows in his heart. He thought back to the times he had let negativity take over, the moments he had blamed life without noticing the good things that still surrounded him. Lowering his head, he said softly, "I understand now, Grandma. Happiness is something we create for ourselves, isn't it?" The old woman nodded gently, a satisfied smile on her lips. "That's right, my dear. Happiness isn't about what happens to us, it's about how we choose to see life." From that day on, the young man began to change. He learned to appreciate the simple things, to smile even when faced with difficulties. And little by little, as if by magic, his world became brighter.